1. Abstract. The internet is full of websites declaring that Lord Enki is a true friend of humanity, and many still see him as our only hope for the future. They have read Sitchin's work and other researchers' interpretation of the Sumerian cuneiform, realizing that mankind are in deep trouble. Enlil YHWH cannot be trusted, because he already eradicated mankind once, even twice, if we really look at it, and probably wouldn't hesitate to do it again. There seem to be other, more gentle gods mentioned in the Enuma Eli, but they seem to be of lower rank, and don't have the influence enough to save us. It's confusing to people. The gods are coming back, they say, even Sitchin did in his book The End of Days. But who then are the good guys? Well, in a confusion, people are looking for a stable datum they can use to help themselves out of the condition. This stable datum is Enki. After all, he was supposedly the one who created mankind, according to Sitchin, so we owe him our allegiance and put our hopes to him. He must be the good guy we all are waiting for. These days, many people are anticipating Enki's return. He will be our new Jesus, and save us from evil. It's not even Sitchin glorified the way some New Age cults and authors do today. We're heading towards the end of the age of Pisces, Enki's sign, and are moving towards the age of Aquarius. Hence many think that now, by the end of this approximately 2,200 year cycle, Enki must return. That has to be the secret behind the connection to his astrological sign. I would say, don't hold your breath. The good ones, as the saying goes, will not land on the White House lawn. And if the reader is wishing Enki to come back, I think you will consider after you have read through this series of papers. Keep in mind that all it's that have contacted us directly, saying they want to save us, have their own agenda, which does not coincide with ours. We are our own saviors, period. I've mentioned that a lot in Level I, but I will take a new slant on it in the last solution section of Level II as well. 2. The Untold Tale of Two Brothers. People who have read Sitchin and other authors have learned that Kumainu had two sons, two brothers, who in fact were half-brothers or step-brothers, and their names were Enlil and Enki, although both were actually titles, not names. We have learned that Enlil supposedly means Lord of the Airways or Lord of Command in the ancient languages, while Enki is said to mean Lord of Earth. In Sitchin's work, and also according to thea.im.idf themselves, Enlil's name is Namur, while Enki became known later as Spahi, whose home is water, Poseidon/Neptune, Omans, and just recently, Anchor 1. It is peculiar, however, that Enlil goes under the name Namur. Namur is clearly an Aryan feminine name, if we trace back the linguistics, and also per Morning Sky's translations, and means mother. However, we see this happen a lot with the Syrian Sumerian gods. They take Aryan feminine names and make them masculine, perhaps in an attempt to insult the queen and the mother goddess. Other names for Enlil is Zeus, Jupiter, Asher, and YHVH/Yehovah. For simplicity, however, I will call these two brothers Enlil and Enki in this level of learning. Figure 3:1 and 3:2. Enki left as Oans, the fish god, and Asherite, a later development of Enlil. Keep in mind, however, that this is how they were depicted in Mesopotamia and Babylon. As we shall see later, this is not even close to how they really looked like. At one point, for reasons we will get into, the Syrians took on human bodies when mingling with humans. We are taught that the two brothers have the same father, who is Anu, but they have different mothers. According to most sources, Enlil's mother is Ki, who is also Anu's half-sister. Incest is common amongst the Syrian overlords, while Enki's mother was not of Anu's bloodline, So therefore, although Enki is the firstborn, as it were, he is not, according to Syrian law, first in the throne succession. In Sirius it's the father's bloodline that counts, while in Orion it's the mother's. Hence Enlil is the lawful heir to the Syrian throne. Enki's mother is mostly known as Antu, which means the one and only mother of heaven, if we follow Morning Sky's linguistics. This, of course, makes us think of the Orion Queen, herself the one and only mother of heaven. The Orion Empire sounds suspiciously similar to the Queen. Moreover, if we continue researching this, we find from different sources that Antu and Nanu are one and the same, as for example, here in Wikipedia. But there is still the problem of who will keep the cosmos working. Enki, who might have otherwise come to their aid, is lying in a deep sleep and fails to hear their cries. His mother Namkrix, also of Abzu and Tiamat, brings the tears of the gods before Enki. Bold not in original 2. In Anton Park's Chronicles, Enki's mother and later lover was Nanu. We know that both the terms Nanu and Tiamat means mother goddess, and who is known as the star, being most closely connected with the mother goddess. Exactly. The Orion Queen. And what else do we know? Will we know that there was a peace treaty between Orion and Sirius, where the Orion Queen married the Connor of Sirius, the one Sitchin calls Anu. So if Nam/Tiamat/Antu is Enki's mother, that makes her the Orion Queen. The Queen of the Stars is Enki's mother. This fact has been totally missed or neglected, both by researchers such as Sitchin and followers of his material. Also those who study mythology have missed this important point. Their research stops when they realize that the two brothers had two different mothers, but apparently the same father, Anu. But wait, is Anu really the father of both Enlil and Enki? No, how could he? The marriage between Queen Nektiti and Anu was pure business and sexless, while Anu on the side had many wives and lovers amongst Syrian women. So it's safe to say that Enlil is pure Syrian, while Enki, on the other hand, is pure Aryan. This becomes obvious when we realize that for the queen to produce a son, he needs to come from an infertilized egg due to how the queen's genetics is set up. If Enki was a female, Anu could potentially have been his father, but under these circumstances it's physically impossible. Enki has no father at all due to that he was born from an infertilized egg. That makes him of pure Orion blood, while Enlil is of pure Syrian blood. So how can they be half-brothers or step-brothers? Simply because Anu is Enki's stepfather, which makes Enlil Enki's stepbrother. Consequently, the Orion Queen is Enlil's stepmother, and there we have the full relationship between the two brothers. This also explains why they are so typically different in nature. Enlil being the hot-headed, bloodthirsty Syrian overlord, while Enki is known to have a softer temper and being more compassionate. However, as we shall see, Enki has been quite glorified in our history, and the question is if he deserves his good reputation. At the end of level II, when the cards are all laid on the table, it's up to you, the reader, to decide. Figure 3-3. Diagram showing the relationship between the entities after the Orion/Syrian business deal marriage. Click on the picture to enlarge. The old records declare that Enki was the master scientist, whom together with his half-sister, lover, and consort, Ninhursag, the goddess of life or the goddess of fire, manipulated the DNA of an existing race to create a slave race for the patriarchs. This slave race became, after many failed attempts, Homo sapiens. Some say that there were genesis scientists also among the Syrians, besides Ninhursag Ninki, for short, but I believe it's the truth, which needs some modification. The Syrians could manipulate DNA of already existing star beings, but they couldn't create something from scratch. In Barbara Marchiniak's book, Earth, Pleiadian Keys to the Living Library, the Pleiadians say that these master geneticists learned their trade from the Ancient Ones, which corresponds with the Aryans too. Another clue to ENKI's connection to Orion. We are going to leave ENKI and return to them in upcoming papers after this little introduction. Instead, we'll move on with explaining certain things that are crucial to understand before we can go forward with our story. 3. Depiction of the gods. In earlier papers I have talked about nano-travel, which means that UTs don't travel in 3D bodies and spaceships between the stars, but shrink themselves to nano-size and travel through stargates. Today, the most advanced UTs don't use stargates anymore, but travel through many black holes. More about that later. I would say that most UTs, those who can travel freely between the dimensions, do so in the nano world. It is hard for us who have been 3D beings for so long to think in these terms, but the more we ponder it, the sooner our neurological pathways will change, and it gets easier to grasp this multidimensional concept. The dimensions they live in are just as physical to them as our third dimension is for us. The difference is that they can travel freely wherever they want in the universe, many times faster than light. Quantum physicists have in recent years proved that nanoparticles can travel faster than light, hence violating Einstein's theory of relativity. Traveling the nano world is the same as traveling the KHA. It requires spiritual knowledge, but also knowledge about the mechanics of the universe and the multiverse. To sail the ocean of KHA, what UTs have in common is that they all visit the nano world to travel long distances, and possibly spaceships to do stellar travel. It wouldn't be convenient for any star race just to travel through space without using stargates, intergalactic highways, or black holes. The distances are too enormous. It would take too long. So bottom line is that we humans need to learn how to do this too before we can reach the stars, or we'll be homebound until we do. Billions of dollars of tax money and the black budget is invested in nanotechnology these days, and learning how to nano-travel is the main reason. The upper echelon of the global elite knows that those who control the nano world control the universe. Still, we need to learn how to travel without technology, or almost without technology, or we'll be limited. My point with all this is to eventually prove that UTs have existed on our planet since her deception. They have come in all shapes and forms, many in spirit only. Others prefer to participate in the 3D reality, and then need to do so in a physical body, because after all, this is a physical world, made out of very condensed energies we choose to call matter, but is basically just another form of energy, and basically an illusion. Unless an ET is just browsing or observing, they would probably want to be a part of the physical reality. So, some ETs, at least to begin with, before there were any human bodies on Earth, either used their avatars to manifest, or came in spirit only without manifesting. If they needed a solid body, they had to create them here with genetic engineering, or insert them through time portals. More about that later in this paper. Then they could jump from body to body. Whatever shape these bodies had, humanoid, reptilian, insectoid, etc. Later on, when Earth was inhabited by humanoid life forms, ETs could insert their soul into these bodies, or hijack a body who already had a soul, and either kick the original soul out or share space with this original soul. Kicking out souls from an existing body and take it over is usually called walk-in. In metaphysics and nexopolitics, cloning was another working solution. By genetically
cloning was another working solution. By genetically cloning an existing body template, whole star races could hypothetically come here and invade Earth if they wanted. If they were technologically savvy enough, and had knowledge to work on some level as founders, they would know how to mass clone biological life forms. Thus they could keep lots of bodies in storage here, keeping them dormant, nano-travel back to their home planet, and nano-travel back here again, and wake up these dormant bodies, and get to work. One could speculate that if a star race came here to invade in the physical, they would perhaps genetically engineer a being that is stronger, taller, more muscular, and less likely to succumb in battle. Perhaps a scaly reptilian, or a flying dragon. By the time Homo sapiens were created, the Ents usually took human bodies just like they do today, and mingled with earthbound humans. No one could tell the difference, and nor can we today either. The reader has probably passed a few on the street every now and then, being clueless that they were not human. However, today it's become quite common that Ents come here as ontoenergetics life forms without bodies, and use avatars to manifest as scary reptilians, greys, dracos, or whatnot in order to confuse and show authority, although some of these beings people see are very physical and live underground, being survivors of very old genetic experiments taking place here on Earth before Homo sapiens were created. So there are many ways for a star being to come to Earth and take form. For example, weren't the Anunnaki giants? This is what we learn in much of the available literature on the subject. I, on the other hand, is telling the reader they were dwarfs, at the size of a 10-year-old. And some, as the reader probably have heard, were dragons and reptilians. How does all this fit together? Well, as we have learned, the term Anunnaki, if we choose to use this term, is a composite of many different races, not only Syrians, so one would expect that they come in different shapes and forms. Many of them could have used their avatars and shape-shift into anything they wanted, and that's part of it, but let's look at it from another angle as well. We know that star races, to be able to travel long distances, need to use nano-travel, and the majority, unless they are highly evolved, take advantage of existing stargates and galactic star lanes to go from one place to another. So also the Syrian overlords. However, at the time when they came to Earth, they traveled the KHA and their hollowed-out asteroids. They were highly developed technologically and used what was called a push/pull drive to travel the universe, something morning sky, also mentioned in his pre-Terra papers. This way, they could shrink themselves and the ship while entering a stargate and sailing the KHA on the galactic highways. They were known as masters in navigating the KHA, so they could hide in what used to be called hyperspace until they chose to enter space/time again and surprise their enemies by seemingly popping up from nowhere with whole armadas of asteroids. Point in case is that they had the ability to expand themselves instantly as soon as they left the KHA and entered what LPGC calls for space/time, or the known universe. Some of the well-known Syrians seem to have been using giant human bodies as well while here on Earth, if we are interpreting the Sumerian cuneiform correctly, while others, like Thoth/Nishzida, were actually born on Earth and grew up here just like any human, but with their memory bank intact. They also lived much longer than normal humans, inhaling gold and probably drinking Esma as well. Figure 3 to 4. Syrian overlord sitting in a chair, but still same height as those who stand up. If the Syrian would stand up, he would be a giant. Is this a correct interpretation, or is it just the artist's freedom to express him/herself? Many scriptures, besides the Bible, talk about that there were giants on Earth in these days. They were called the Witchers, or the IGG, and they were giants who came down to Earth to copulate with Earth women. They produced offspring that were perhaps even more gigantic than the Watchers themselves. This offspring was called the Nephilim. However, the Watchers were not Syrians, but Pleiadians, who were indeed large in stature, bird-like and reptilian-like. They too came via the nano-world, but used cloned giant bodies when they entered 4x/space and descended on Earth. According to Marchiniak's Pleiadian group, these Watchers/Pleiadians are actually giants on their home planet, too being bird-like reptilians. This is probably the reason they chose giant bodies while on Earth. They felt comfortable in them. Figure 3 to 5. Thuban Alpha Draconis, in comparison with Sirius and Orion, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. Another star race, which has had quite some influence on Earth history, is the Alpha Draconians. It has come to my knowledge that Thuban and other stars in the Draco star constellation were once conquered by the Sirians, and are now of Sirian domain. In fact, Thuban Alpha Draconis is one of the most important bases of the Sirian Empire, besides Sirius itself. So Thuban is now inhabited both by Sirians, has a Sirian kin, but the original intelligent race, who lived there before the invasion, are now minions to the Sirian overlords, and perhaps even slaves. We have already talked about shapeshifting in other papers, and we know that's done by using avatars/light bodies. I said earlier that ufologists and exopoliticians are patiently trying to categorize different alien types, and figure out who is working with whom, an impossible task, until they understand that most of these species people encounter are shapeshifters. I just saw a reference in the Pleiadian book, Family of Light, as well on the subject. Because many of the visitors are shapeshifters, you have not been able to categorize and name them, which is of course your 3D linear approach. 5. And here, again from the same source. Your ancestors spoke with the gods, and knew that they took many forms, that they were multidimensional shapeshifters, existing sometimes as humans, or animals, sometimes taking the forms of snakes, serpents, dragons, and reptiles. They flew in the heavens, and swam in the oceans, and walked the earth. 6. 4. Morona.m.t, a Canibru. Dr. A.R. Borden, of LPGC, told me a couple of years ago about the catastrophe that happened over in Sirius about 1 billion years ago. 3. Sirius C exploded, became a nova, and shrunk into a white dwarf, which is still its condition today. But before the star became a nova, at least one of their planets, only one planet is mentioned, was catapulted out in deep space due to gravitational issues related to changes in their unstable sun. This planet is known today under many names, such as Nibiru, Planet X, and now through LPGCA.m.t, which supposedly also is what the inhabitants of this planet are calling it. A.m.t, after had cruised deep space for a long time, was pulled in by Neptune's gravity and entered our solar system. According to Sitchin, the moon of this renegade planet, which is allegedly at least 6 times bigger than Earth, collided with Earth, which at that point was orbiting the Sun, between Mars and Jupiter. After had created quite some havoc, A.m.t, was slung out in deep space again, just to return after approximately 3,600 years. The next passing was harsher, Sitchin said. Again, one of A.m.t's moons collided with Earth, which was much larger than it is today, and split it in half. A.m.t disappeared out in deep space once again, and had at this point become a member of our own solar system, albeit with a much wider orbit. Earth was disrupted in its orbit, and eventually found its place between Venus and Mars, while the other half of our planet became the asteroid belt. This story has some similarities to my own, but more differences than similarities, really. Sitchin fails to tell us that Terra Earth was inhabited before the catastrophe, and that the catastrophe did not happen due to A.m.t's passing, but because of space wars. With that said, it doesn't mean A.m.t/Nibiru does not exist. I'm convinced it does. AR further told me that A.m.ti became spacefaring around 8 to 9 million years ago as a civilization type 04, but encountered another star race who helped them become a civilization type 1. They are excellent miners, and are interested in, besides gold, quartz and other tight latticed crystals. They are still here, and have 3 platforms in the inner parts of the solar system, and bases on some of the moons around the outer planets, Neptune in particular. Where exactly the platforms in the inner solar system are located, I was not being told, but I have my suspicions. He is also mentioning, in passing, that the Sirians, who are home and away groups, are of the same genetic stem, which to me indicates that AR is talking about home being Sirius and away beinga.m.e. So where doesa.m.e fit into this whole picture, if it's not the home planet of the Syrians? According to AR, the Syrians, or at least thea.m.I, if we are to separate the two groups, were not spacefaring. WHENA.m.E was catapulted out in space 1 billion years ago. They had no place to go, no spaceships to leave the planet with, and no nano-travel to rely on, so all they had left to do in order to survive was to go underground. Albeit not spacefaring, they were probably technologically advanced enough to realize that the catastrophe was coming, and I'm sure they had plenty of time to figure out how to be able to live beneath the surface. They may or may not have had insights that the planet would be catapulted out, but it doesn't matter. Going underground would probably be the best way to survive anyway. Here is the interesting part, though. If AR is correct, the inhabitants of FA.M.E may not have known about the other Syrian civilizations and the other planets orbiting Sirius A and Sirius B. It sounds like, from what AR says, that those who evolved on one or several planets around Sirius A and B were seeded by the same founders as the ones living on A.M.E, because he tells us they are of the same biological stem. From all the information I have gathered from AR, internet sources, books, and anonymous sources, I have come to the following conclusion. WHENA.M.E was catapulted out from Sirius 1 billion years ago. There were no spacefaring beings at all in the Sirius star system. However, perhaps even shortly AFTRA.M.E left, another branch of Syrians, who became the Syrian overlords, evolved on another planet, around Sirius and or B. They are the ones who got involved in space wars, and eventually made a peace treaty with the Queen. This group was eventually being led by the one whom Sitchin calls Anu, which is probably not his real name, as Anu means heaven, something we learn from almost anyone who has studied Old Sumerian cuneiform, and is therefore probably just a title. His real name is lost, or was never given to mankind. The home Syrians were the ones who conquered space and built the Syrian Empire, something that probably happened way earlier than 8 to 9 million years ago. However, due to THATA.M.E was no longer orbiting an star in Sirius, but had been adopted by our own solar system, the home Syrians may not have known about the existence of THEA.M.I until much later, when they invaded our solar system. The Aryans may have known about them, but didn't pay much attention to them as they were living underground and minded their own business. After all, and this is something mainstream scientists have started realizing, there are many civilizations who are living inside their planets. It's almost as common as living on the surface.
There are many civilizations who are living inside their planets. It's almost as common as living on the surface. At one point, however, and this comes from AR, as will THEA.M.I people started building a huge city above ground on THEA.M.E planet, shielded under a cupola, to begin with, using an artificial atmosphere. With time, they figured out that they could use the heat from inside their planet and direct it to create an atmosphere that would hold up even in deep space, but they needed gold to be able to stabilize it. A.M.E probably had its own gold resources that they could use in the beginning, but after a while they must have depleted themselves of it and needed gold from elsewhere. This was probably one reason why they developed into a spacefaring race some 8 to 9 billion years ago, although not as advanced as the home Syrians, and they most certainly did not use hollowed-out asteroids at this point. That was a technology developed by the home Syrians, not THEA.M.I. So who was it that came to Earth interfering with the Queen's initial project, the home Syrians, or THEA.M.I? Well, it's obvious it was the home Syrians, led by Prince Enlil. Whether THEA.M.I had landed on Terra before the home Syrians or not, I will not debate, because I don't know, but it's possible. However, it's reasonable to believe they couldn't stay long here each time. They arrived every 3,600 years because their planet did not linger in our solar system for any extended amount of time, but instead continued its journey into deep space. So if they were here, digging for gold, they must have stayed only briefly, and it would be too much of a coincidence if they were here at the exact same time when Enlil and his people first encountered our solar system. So the Home Syrians were the ones who started the serious efforts of digging for gold and minerals, and were the ones who defeated the Aryans in the War of the Titans. However, at one point or another, the Home Syrians, now stationed in Eridu, noticed the Incominga.m.t. They may have explored it and found of it to be inhabited. In their usual manner, the Home Syrians probably occupied this new world and took command over it. It must have puzzled them at first, noticing that THEA.M.I were of the same stock as they were, and when they found out that THEA.M.I were their own long-lost cousins, they may have started being softer with them. Understanding more about Syrian mentality, I can imagine that when ENU was informed about the found TDCLAREDA.M.T Syrian property, and the inhabitants were incorporated into the Syrian Empire and had to obey Syrian laws. However, this was also a great opportunity to see that his son, Enlil, stayed away from ENU's planet, the king always being nervous about that his son was going to overthrow him. So it's plausible that King ENU put Enlil in command over ERA.M.T, which in certain terms now became the prince's domain. This theory makes sense in many ways, and all the different stories come together. THEA.M.I people became the Syrian miners who had to work long hours in the mines, digging up gold, quartz, and tight lattice crystals. The Home Syrians, with Lord Enlil in command, were already excellent miners, but probably still had a lot to learn from THEA.M.I, so they combined their knowledge and skills, and thus they could be more sufficient. Albeit THEA.M.I miners started feeling more like slaves than workers, and I can imagine Lord Enlil treating them like we treated the black people we hijacked from Africa once upon a time and made slaves to the rich families in America. Sad thing. As above so below, Enlil may have talked them into continuing their mining for quite a while, letting them know that they needed gold to sustain and maintain their atmosphere, hence requiring that they stop complaining. This is a working hypothesis, so I am going to use it in these papers. All evidence and the sources I've been able to find are pointing me in this direction. The Home Syrians and THEA.M.I are two different species, but still of the same humanoid stem, although I would call them humanoid/woven/reptilian. Do they even look the same? They probably do, perhaps with some minor differences, after all being seated on different planets. However, I have no real evidence of how the ORIGINALA.M.I look like, but with time there is a chance I can find out. 5. The third dimension. It takes a lot of effort to keep the third dimension in place. As it seems, this dimension is a dimension of solidity, where light has been trapped, so it can form matter. It's a construct which can act as a playground for non-physicals ontoenergetics from other dimensions and superdomains. Many are curious about how it is to live here, to experience a human body, have sex, and touch and hold all these things that are available in the physical world. Many star races may have started out as physical beings, only to choose to become ontoenergetics at one point or another. Not all star races are founders, either, so they don't know how to clone or genetically engineer a physical body. Therefore, some of them may want to experience a 3D world again. After all, being ontoenergetics, it may seem, from their perspective, that living in a 3D world and having a physical body is a piece of cake, because in the non-physical everything is possible. Those who manage to get themselves a human body, however, find it much harder to live down here than they could ever imagine. It's not an easy ride, but there are things you can do here that you can't do as a non-physical. One of these things is to have sex. Many star beings choose to come to Earth only for that reason. The physical world, which is only about 4% of all that is, can be a double-edged sword. This 4% has different densities, and physicality exists in all of them in one way or the other, but is never as solid as here in a 3D reality. Nowhere else do you need to first think a solid thought, plan how to execute the thought, and then physically do it in a super dense and slow environment. Very little here happens in an instance. You have to really create it, which takes time. And time is an important factor in 3D. We always feel we race against time, because our lifespan is only about 70 to 85 years. Star races are seeding in the third dimension, and in other dimensions as well within first space/time, depending on what the founders want to do when they experiment with genetics. Our ancestors, the Namlo, were beings of all dimensions, but had the ability to live on Terra in a less dense form than we do, and everything else was less dense too because Terra existed in another density. Was it still 3D? Yes, but at a higher frequency, one which corresponded with that of the rest of the physical universe. This frequency was later changed by the Sirians. Physicality, which is how we perceive 3D, is held in vibration in many ways. Many of the readers have probably seen these majestic crystal forests underneath the Earth's surface, and how explorers walk around in this awesome world of crystals. If you haven't, I strongly suggest that you Google it and check it out. It's really mind-blowing. Still, these forests are like mini forests compared to the crystal forests deeper down under the surface, beyond what humanity is supposed to travel. Those forests are gigantic, like enormous redwood forests. But what are they for? Will crystals store information and transform information as well? Plus they vibrate and are resonant. They store information from the cosmos and transmits information back to the cosmos as well, and keep the third dimension and its physicality in place. So crystals have a profound way of holding the vibration of the third dimension and stabilizing it. Without the crystals we wouldn't be able to live here. Then it's a totally different ballgame, being trapped here with no obvious way to get out. We lost our multidimensionality at the same moment. We decided to stick with our Syrian slave drivers, and fell for their flattery when they made some of us for more than others, and in charge of the rest. This trapped both those in charge and those who followed order. We may argue that it wasn't our fault, and that the Syrians did this on purpose to create a slave race, etc., and that would be absolutely true. But in practicality, what happened was that we agreed to do it their way, more and more so over the millennia, until we trapped ourselves through our genetic lineage and our genetic memories. Now once our souls take a body, we are caught up in this master-slave mentality. Still, especially now in the nanosecond 1987 to 2012, many non-physicals fight over a body here on Earth. Some, like we discussed earlier, come for sex, but the energies down here are intense, and the learning curve extremely high. From a non-physical perspective, that can be quite attractive. Many of those who have watched and studied Earth for some time also understand that it's the numbers that count. We need the numbers to break free. We are 7 billion souls on this planet, and 1,000 times more than that who want bodies here right now, but can't. However, like the Pleiadians say, and which makes total sense to me, is that everybody who lives here on Earth right now is here to participate in the nanosecond, in one way or the other. All of us contribute to the intensive energies that can shake the prison walls. 250 years ago, or so, we were only 1 billion people on the planet, and only in a short time, We have increased that number by 7. There is certainly a reason for this, which we will talk more about later. The entrapment which follows with this particular 3D reality we live in is about to fade away for many of us. Not everybody will make it, unfortunately, but we are here to help as many as we can, and that is all our responsibility. The gods of this reality, too, because they can come here and play around with gold, precious stones, DNA, or whatever they want, and everything they do has a ripple effect across the different dimensions.
6. The grid, the frequency fence, the quarantine and the veil of amnesia. How it all works. We have talked about how the third dimension can hold its frequency, much due to the great crystal forests underneath the Earth. This, of course, is not the only reason the planet stays in vibration, but perhaps one of the biggest stabilizers. Many think that it's the third dimension that is the trap, and that we need to destroy that frequency to be able to become star beings. Not so. This is basically the dimension in which intelligent life starts on most planets after they have been genetically engineered by the founders. Therefore, the normal and healthy procedure for a star race to grow up must progress something like the sum of this is repetition, just for it to sink in. A new solar system is born. When the planets have cooled down, founders come and ask for permission to create on one or more of the planets. After plant and animal life are seeded, they start creating a more intelligent species that can reach for the stars. The species go through their eras of technology, most of them, and begin to explore their own solar system, hence engineering spaceships that can take them near and far in their own stellar system. Soon enough they start pondering what technology they need in order to reach the stars. However hard they try, they can't figure out how to get there. The distances are too long. At one point or another, they realize that they are a spirit in a body, and that their biological vessels can't make it in space. They are not designed to. They may try robots at first, but the star travel takes way too long. Sooner or later they figure out that there are stargates they can use, but their physical bodies can still not do the trip. Eventually they figure out how to split the soul into different fragments, and find out that they can soul travel, nano-travel, through stargates and out on the galactic highways, and reach their destination in almost no time, while their biological bodies stay home. In fact, their bodies will never be able to leave their own home system. They are not made to travel in space. They discover that they can shapeshift by using their avatar/light body to manifest themselves in any physical form they like. However, it has its limitations, because it can't do certain things, like having sex, and other practical things, although it appears very physical. You can even shake hands with it, having the same sensation as if it's real. If the purpose of the star race is to conquer other star systems, they may do so in the nano-world, by attaching themselves to already existing bodies in the planet they're visiting, and slowly take over. Or if they know how to genetically engineer, they can clone bodies within the solar system they are visiting, and use these bodies to conquer. The bodies they are using may look exactly like the bodies of those they are conquering, which will be very confusing for those who are attacked, or they may manifest as something else. They may want to create bodies that are stronger and more endurable than their original ones, or the ones of the inhabitants of the planet they're conquering. The Syrians are the only ones who use push/pull drive that I am aware of. This takes much longer, and they still have to shrink themselves and their asteroids and travel through stargates in a much slower fashion. Once on the other side, they can apparently get the asteroid back to normal size, but they can't take their physical bodies with them. When they first came to Radu, they came with their soul/avatar, and eventually created bodies here they could use. If we take the Syrians as an example, they look like wolven/reptilian dwarfs on their home planet, but when they travel to other star systems, they adjust to what is most appropriate to them there, and manifest as such. Each star system has their own biology. The beings may be humanoid, reptilian mothmen, insectoids, sauroids, greys, and you name it. But these biological bodies stay put where they are and are not used for interstellar travels. So if you want to see real reptilian the way they really look, you have to nano-travel to a star system which is inhabited by such a race. Otherwise you will only see them as a manifestation of someone's avatar. Star beings can shapeshift into anything they wish. They would be as real as you and I, but it's not their real bodies. Even if they would look like that on their home planet as well, what the person saw is still just a soul manifestation, similar to what people do after body death. They separate from their body and go to the between life area, BLA, where they notice they can manifest whatever they want. However, that's done in the ether, which is another dimension, much less dense than 3D, so these bodies may appear more transparent. But ETs can do the same thing down here, and make their manifestation appear as solid as our human bodies. ETs, who interfere with our evolution, are doing this all the time, often illegally. Either by self-realization, or the star race may encounter a race who is more evolved, and teach them more peaceful ways of living. Sooner or later a star race grows up, and stops creating violence around them, and become peaceful races. And of course, far from every star race will becomes conquerors either. Still, there are star races who prefer technology before spirituality and continue killing and raping for a very long time. The Syrians are one such race. Some channeled material say such beings are of negative density and evolve as service to self, STS, love to self, contrary to those who choose to experience love as service to others, STO. Once a star race reaches the stars, by knowing how to nano-travel, they are interdimensional. When they also realize that they create reality with their thoughts, and can decide what future they want just by focusing their thoughts, throw out all their sloppy thoughts, and become visionaries, they adjust and tune into a multiverse that fits their vibrations, and peace and harmony in general can be the natural state of being on the planet, or within the Federation, if such a communion is built. The star race soon learns that they should not interact with evolving star races on other 3D planets and interfere with their learning lessons. They will learn that it would be a break of the universal law of non-interference. Not until a star race is able to nano-travel and communicate telepathically can another star race contact them and ask them for permission to descend on their planet. If the stationary star races agrees, trading treaties and other agreements may be set up, and also exchange of knowledge in all different fields may be established, and they may even build a federation if they want. Each star race is indexed by their creator gods to a certain planet, and their bodies are adapted to live on that particular world, breathe its atmosphere, and move around comfortably. If another star race would have been able to visit a certain planet in their own bodies, the conditions would most probably be wrong for them, and they'd have to wear space suits all the time, or the gravitational field would be too heavy or too light. The planet may be too close or too far away from the sun, and the visitor would either burn up or freeze. On a planet where beings are not trapped, and there is no amnesia between lives, indexed bodies can still cease to function when they are material and die, but then the soul just takes a new body with memories intact.